want to bring on a good buddy of mine. He's also the founder and the president of the Article 3 Project, where he's my colleague at the Article 3 Project. That, of course, is the great Mike Davis. Mike, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You bet, of course. So there's a lot to unpack here. We were just talking about the immunity case, which will be decided this week. I want to get to the Judge Cannon stuff with Jack Smith and the constitutionality or lack thereof of the appointment in Florida. But before we get to that, let's start with that immunity case. What are you hearing? What are the tea leaves that you're sniffing? What are you expecting at the Supreme Court later this week in the big President Trump immunity case?
Well, what I expect is the Supreme Court to hold that the President of the United States, any President of the United States, is immune from criminal prosecution for his official acts, not his personal acts, his official acts. And what this means is that if the President is charged with doing something in his official capacity, like, for example, Jack Smith alleged that Trump somehow committed a crime for objecting to the presidential election, which is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. And one of the overt acts that Jack Smith alleged as part of this crime is that President Trump contemplated firing his acting attorney general. Well, you can't do that as a private citizen. You can only do that President of the United States. So that part of Jack Smith's criminal allegations against Trump would get thrown out. I think the court's going to rule narrowly. I think they're going to send this case back down to D.C. Obama Judge Tanya Shukin to hold an evidentiary hearing to figure out what did Jack Smith allege against Trump that's in his personal capacity versus his presidential capacity. That's going to require several weeks to get to that point. It's going to take at least 30 days for the judgment to get sent back down to Judge Shukin after the court rules, and then an evidentiary hearing after that, and then Trump can appeal for decision on that. If it implicates presidential immunity again, that could go to the D.C. Circuit. But the bottom line is it's very unlikely that this case will get tried before the election, and that's a good thing because Jack Smith waited 30 months to bring these bogus charges. He can wait into the election if he wants to continue to prosecute the leading presidential candidate. If there's anyone who is waging lawfare and election interference, it's Jack Smith, not Donald Trump.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And once again, we're joined by Mike Davis, who is a pro-Trump legal warrior and also my colleague at the Article 3 Project. So it'll be interesting. And I totally agree with you, Mike, that no matter which way this cookie crumbles, Jack Smith is going to be very, very hard-pressed to get this thing across the finish line. I mean, he'll probably be hard-pressed to get started in the first place there in Washington, D.C., But we're based here in Florida, of course, and the Florida prosecution against Donald Trump has really been heating up over the past few days. Judge Amy Coney, the Trump nominee who is in Fort Pierce, Florida, who is overseeing this classified documents case, she's hearing arguments, Mike, if I have it correctly, over the legality, the constitutionality of whether or not the special counsel has been appointed correctly in the first place. Why don't you just walk the listeners through what is going on Friday and also today and tomorrow in Judge Cannon's courtroom there in Fort Pierce, Florida?
So Judge Cannon is a very good judge, and she does what every good judge is supposed to do, and that is to make sure that the criminal defendant gets a fair process and a fair trial. And there have been times when she's ruled for Trump, and there have been many times when she's ruled against Trump, and that's what she's supposed to do as a federal judge. But because she's not a rubber stamp for the Biden Justice Department, because she's not a rubber stamp for Jack Smith, she takes hell from these Biden Democrats. But you know what's good about Judge Cannon is her family escaped Marxism, right? So she's used to dealing with government tyranny, and so I don't think it's going to phase her, which is a good thing. That's exactly what you want in a judge. You have lifetime tenure, you have pay protection. One of the issues that she's looking at is the very constitutionality of Jack Smith's prosecution, because Jack Smith is a special counsel, a made-up position under Department of Justice regulations. This position is not created by a statute passed by Congress, and Jack Smith is not a Senate-confirmed official. So if you are essentially just an employee in the Justice Department, you have to be accountable to a Senate-confirmed official, right? You have to be accountable to the an officer of the United States. And the Attorney General is an officer of the United States. He is presidentially appointed. He's Senate-confirmed. But the problem is that the regulations within the Justice Department actually create distance between the Attorney General and the special counsel he appoints. And so the Attorney General does not get to effectively supervise the special counsel like a United States attorney who's Senate confirmed supervises assistant U.S. attorneys in the various offices around the country. So we've created this office through regulation, not even through statute, and it has nationwide jurisdiction, virtually an unlimited budget, and almost no political accountability to the Senate confirmed attorney general. And so that's what Judge Cannon is looking at.
Yeah, Mike, what it reminds me of the old debate of the independent counsel of old. And, for those of us who are lawyers, we think back to this blistering dissent that the late, great Justice Antonin Scalia had in a late 1980s case called Morrison versus Olson, where he famously decried the independent counsel as a wolf that comes as a wolf because it was so flagrantly unconstitutional and violative of the DOJ hierarchy, and it was outside of the separation of powers. And it seems to me that that's kind of what is going on here to an extent when it comes to Jack Smith as well, which is probably why you had Aileen Cannon asking him and his lawyers in court on Friday how much Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is directly communicating with Jack Smith. So, Mike, how is this case in Florida going to play out? I mean, is there any chance that this one actually makes it to a jury prior to November?
I doubt it, just because they waited 30 months to bring these bogus charges. They timed these trials back to back to back with these Biden Democrat prosecutors at Main Justice, Jack Smith, Jay Bratt, along with these Biden Democrat prosecutors in other jurisdictions like New York. And they have tried to time these 4 criminal trials back to back to back to keep Trump trapped in a courtroom instead of on a campaign trail. They just successfully did that for 2 months in Manhattan with their bogus show trial against Trump there. But there are so many key issues, novel issues. For example, there's never been a former president's never been charged. They are charging President Trump in Mar-a-Lago for having his presidential records, which is allowed under the Presidential Records Act. I don't know how that could possibly be espionage. They say, well, these documents are classified. So what? Presidential records include both classified and non-classified records. Of course, the president of the United States is going to create and receive many, many, many classified records as the president of the United States. And the Presidential Records Act clearly contemplates that. That's why Congress gives the former president the office of former president with federally funded staff, with security clearances, secure office space, Secret Service protection. Of course, the president is going to have classified presidential records. This is all nonsense that they ran this raid on Trump for presidential records that he's allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. The real reason they did this is because Trump had his declassified copy of the Crossfire Hurricane records that are so damning for Obama, Biden, Hillary, the FBI, the CIA. They made up the Russian collusion hoax to go after Trump to protect Hillary, right? And they were going to get caught, and that's why we have the Mar-a-Lago raid.